I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Joel Sains. That's my buddy Patrick McCray. That's my buddy Gordon Dymowski. We're here to review the Avengers Season 4, Episode 3. Really, really fun. The machines in this movie are fun. They had the one, I sort of wonder, and I don't know if you guys will be able to answer this for me, but did the creators of did Capcom, when they created Resident Evil 2, did they go back and watch this episode and say, you know what, we're going to take a zombie and make it look just like this robot and call him Mr. X? Because he sort of dresses like Mr. X. Well, I would say Capcom sort of took from this episode.
Well, Gordon, you might know precisely the answer to that. I have a general answer.
I would say that, I don't have any documentation that says that Capcom actually watched it, but it wouldn't be surprising if they did and said, "Let's steal that," because that's one of the things that a lot of like visual media do is they'll steal like, "Hey, let's do this," or "Well, let's do this." And so it's not like you can say, okay, well, they definitely borrowed that.
Yeah.
But I think you can say like, okay, maybe someone did, but unless they say outright, your guess is as good as mine.
Well, the way the robot's dressed in the hat and like the trench coat looking thing, I'll send the picture of Mr. X to you guys. It definitely looks like Capcom had watched this episode. Like, you know what I mean?
Maybe they did.
It's really weird. When I saw that, I'm thinking, Mr. X? But what a fun episode this was. Great selection by Gordon. When did you guys first watch this bad boy, this episode here?
It was the soap. It was for me in 1989, 88 or 89. And I had an Anglophile biology teacher, and she was not going to be there one day, and she had this put on for us. And I had heard the Avengers. I'd seen the Avengers, but I had not seen this episode. And it was a hell of a treat. That was back in the days when you had teachers who were cool enough to do something like that. Mm-hmm. It was a good time to be alive.
Yeah. Gordon, when did you first watch this episode?
I think I first watched this probably on A&E in the early 80s because I was familiar with the episode Return of the Cybernauts, which is the next season. But the black and white Avengers I don't think had been shown until like the late 80s. And I remember when they showed this on A&E, there's like an actual, for the American market, they actually had like a little 30-second snippet, crimes against the people must be avenged by agents extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was nice to see, because I know how the plot of Return of the Cybernauts goes, and it's literally the very next year, but watching it in black and white, like I really got a sense it was nice to see the show kind of at their third season. Yeah. You've had a year of two guys fighting crime, 2 years of Steed and Kathy Gale doing like more crime, stuff. And I hadn't seen that yet, but it's like more as myth. And now you see how everything is kind of coming. You can tell they've been doing this a while, and that everything kind of just came together perfectly.
A while, but not too long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They really do a good job of pacing these episodes too. Like even the earlier episodes, they're like you said, they're really more about crime. Where these more feel like, I would say these later episodes more feel like evil boss villains. They're more. It feels like there's more stakes in these episodes. Would I be wrong or?
Well, yeah, because it's. I think when you limit yourself to, first off, it was just the spirit of the time. You had a lot of kind of James Bond spy science fiction-esque shows. If you You go in one direction, you've got Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is kind of high-end James Bond filmed every week. You go in another direction, you throw in some horses, you have Wild Wild West. Here you've got the, two British secret aid. You've got a man and a woman fighting crime, but it's against a very English backdrop. It's the idea that, so of course you're going to get like these big, bossy, big and Michael, because that's what Bond does. There's always the big bad.
This episode here, you had a lot of things going on. You had a martial arts school, a judo karate school, I should say, which was really cool. Mrs. Peel takes down the woman in the fight, and I like how the sense is like, you see, you fought her like a woman, and you shouldn't have did that. So great. This show always has great choreography. Do you guys know if they how much rehearsal they did with choreography or anything?
I don't think they got a lot. They got some. I think that obviously the performers are really talented. And you can probably talk to Diana Rigg's fight history, but I'm sure you had a lot of dance.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know they had a fight coordinator and they had like stunt people, so it wasn't like. But you also have like McNee was probably brought up in England. Probably learned how to fence because there's a seen a couple episodes back where he's fencing. I know that Rigg did a lot of her own kind of combat, and that's one of the reasons why they use judo, because it's more about using opponent's strength versus kicking people's asses. So, but I think there is a little bit more of a thinking to how they construct fight scenes. That it's not like the typical 60s where, okay, you've got two a typical 60s scene might be two dudes in a room, they're about to fight, then you cut to a far shot so their stunt doubles can come in and actually do the work.
Mm-hmm. They do a really good job with this show too, adding horror elements. We saw that with the House of Jack built, and we see that here too. There's somebody going around killing these people, and they seem to have this inhuman strength. And what you come to learn is it's a robot, and there's more than one of these things by the end. I was not expecting that here at all, because I had not seen this episode. Very shocking to me, but it was very inventive and initiative by the writers to pull this off, because this is before Terminator and stuff like that, and they're doing these cool effects on these cool sets. They did a really good job using the sets too here with the fights. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, yes. Yeah. And I think part of the kudos has to go to Brian Clemens, who wrote this, because he's the guy who, he was a producer, but he's the one who got the Avengers right. And you can see his fingerprints all throughout the series. It also reflects, it's a certain kind of, there's a kind of strand of literature in British culture called the thriller. Think a lot of Hitchcock movies where it's about kind of high end. It's not horror in the sense that we would say like Friday the 13th or Halloween or horror, but it's that idea of you're getting people to feel that fear. It's like okay, what's going to happen next versus kind of like, I hope something's not going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the things it's one of the things you don't really see in a lot of modern media is the fact that you can have these vast visual passages where they're silent, or the music which is going the bump, 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 bump.
Mm.
So I do think, and I think it's one of the reasons why I think the show lasts so long, because it doesn't feel, even when it goes light, there's still like a drama to it. And it's also, what I also love about it is it's witty without being quippy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when sort of David Chase style witty TV is brought up, and I guess maybe that's no longer a thing. I don't know if he's working, but I used to hear a lot about it when Boston Legal was on, and it was so self-conscious. All I could see were the girders. It just this setup for the gags. Time and time again. Here, the language doesn't do that. It just gets to the gag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, managing to do that. I mean, this is an episode that goes through several shifts and turns. I mean, the karate plot just turns out to be a dead end.
Yeah.
But you need to have, you also have one of the cool things about having a pair, having a drama led by a pair of people is that you can split the story. You've got one person going one way, the other person going another way, and at some point they're going to converge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it allowed for a karate scene.
Mm-hmm.
And which was pretty hot stuff back then. And I would say a really nicely delivered examination of who Emma Peel is and how she does what she does. Or one of her many skills, at least.
Yeah, you're with two people, you're able to investigate this part, what you think might be going on, and come back and go, no, this might not have nothing to do with what might be going on or is going on. And I also think, too, with the Avengers, yeah, I do think they had a Hitchcock, but I also think, too, they had some Val Lewton here, too, by not showing you this robot right away. You're sort of like, okay, what is going on here? Was it just a super strong human who just did this?
One of the things that the British are known for, especially with their theater, because not always a lot of money, especially compared to American money, in English entertainment. So they compensate that with choices that are intentionally elusive, that really have a lot, that pull from maybe other things, but have a lot of power. And so the first thing that gets your attention in this episode, for me, is the sound effect of the Cybernaut striking that and then pow, which gives them a sense of speed and a sense of unpredictability and kind of a godlike supernatural sort of thing that I also it absolutely commanded my attention.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If there were an Avengers today, who would you cast?
Unfortunately, I don't think you could do an Avengers. Mostly, I think part of it is that the sensibility would be more to go quippy and humor and, I think one of the strengths of the Avengers is that because each episode is self-contained, there is a sense of, ironically, there's a sense of progression, whereas the way that I think most streaming is done now, even if you'd probably want to do like a subplot, you'd probably want to do are Steve and Mrs. Peel going to hook up at the end? Whereas
sure,
very ambiguous. Yeah. Here, it's the actors had their opinion, and they've talked about how they acted on set, what they thought the characters were doing. For the audience, it's left up in the air. Unfortunately, everything right now needs to be put, set in stone. Like, yes, this is a thing. They are going to head there. So I'm not really sure you could do. It's not, I don't think you could do this show effectively.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on what you consider to be essential in this mythos. Mm-hmm. And one of the fortunate things is that the show is a lot of things, and what you do have to do, which may be unfortunate, as Gordon suggested, is that we are more reductionist now. So we would be picking, okay, you have 5 major qualities that define the Avengers. Pick 2. Right. And if you pick 2, is that still going to be the Avengers or not? Now, I don't know about the gentleman, but I immediately thought of Florence Pugh for Emma Peel.
Yeah.
I think would just be a delight.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
For John Steed, I love me some Lenny James. I'll pick him.
Who's that?
He's the guy
Is he
who
a
played.
wrestler?
No. He was the guy who that guy on The Walking Dead. Who did he play? God, I'm trying to think. The guy.
Herschel.
No, he was the guy with the stick. Like he would like.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan?
No.
He has a stick.
No. What's his name? What's his character's name? Oh God, I'm gonna kick myself because I can see his face, and I can't. Morgan, the guy who played Morgan.
Sure. Yes, exactly. I called it.
Yeah, he's a good actor, so that's who I would pick to play John Steed.
There you go.
But yeah, so I wasn't the robot with a. They use these pens to have the robot track you down and kill you, which was interesting. What did you guys think of that?
I think it was a good idea, but you have to consider this is being made in the mid '60s. Like now, if you were to do it, you'd have okay, we had them download an app, and there's also an even cleverer version in the sequel of how people get tracked down. But I also think the idea of solid ink. I don't know if that was an actual thing in the '60s. But when I heard that, I thought of the Fisher Space Pen.
Yes.
Now it'd be they'd use your cell phone.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, there's some sort of weird app. I would have toilet paper on the bottom of their shoe, and that would be the thing. A long stream of it. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I like the pen because it stays on someone. It's the sort of thing they're going to keep in their pocket. It's not too heavy. It has a reason for being there. I thought there was a sequence when she's talking to the mad scientist. And he's a mad scientist who doesn't have lapels. He's immediately, he shops at the same place Damian Edwards does. And by that I mean the future. He at one point I think he was talking about machines and humanity and I don't know when the superiority of one over the other. I don't remember the dialogue. Gordon, you might have a better sense of it, but it felt really contemporary.
Yeah, I mean this is one of those episodes that I think has aged well because it really expressed that 1960s sense of, oh my God, computers are taking over. Woo. And I think when he's talking about, computers the size of like a pack of cigarettes, and it does feel very prescient in a way that I don't think it was intended.
No.
But I think it kind of gives it a little bit more of a lift.
The writer definitely was tapping into a concern that would just balloon. And Jewel, to circle back to something, you began this by asking us if we'd ever seen one that looked like that, but then you went to talking about whether or not the zombies in Resident Evil, was that it? Is that the one? House of the Dead or something?
In Resident Evil 2, there's a character called Mr. X that crashes through the ceiling of the Raccoon Police Department. He wears a hat and a trench coat. And how they dress the first robot, that's how Mr. X is dressed. My question was, did maybe Capcom draw inspiration from this episode a bit?
Maybe, but keep in mind, the classic kind of big brooding guy outfit is a heavy trench coat and a hat.
Yeah.
Like if I wore that, if I wore that, I'd look, I think I'd look threatening.
Well, you have a gravitas. I would say anyway. So I think you command
but I would
respect
look like,
anyway.
yeah, but if I wore that, I'd look like I would sooner kill you than look at you. There's a threat there. There's
That's
an
true. That's true.
ominousness.
Luminous smile that disarms all of that.
Yeah, it's the smile.
It is though. I remember that. The what I was going to say is that if it were something that were on the minds of the designers, it's because this is one of those pieces that's on kind of third level, and by that I mean we're ascending here rather than descending. Third level deep geek knowledge, just part of that zeitgeist, part of things that when you achieve a certain level of knowing this stuff, you have absorbed. And if you're not familiar with the show backwards and forwards, you know a few definite things about it, and this is one of them. And so it would be playing around in the back of your, sort of the collective geek unconscious that they might have been tapping into.
It's kind of like Dark Shadows with some of its influences. Like, if you read something like, say, like the Adam storyline is very much Frankenstein the novel, for lack of a better term. But like, how much of the pre-1897 stuff is, it's not beat for beat like Turn of the Screw. 1970 Parallel Time, although it uses Rebecca, is not beat for beat like Rebecca.
No, it's not.
1841 Parallel Time, although it includes the idea of a lottery, it's nothing like The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So it's this kind of weird melange of when you take in and you're writing something, you're not necessarily thinking, unless you're a bad comedy screenwriter in the early 2000s, you're not throwing in gratuitous references just to make references.
Yeah, and that really was a blight for a while, I think, on entertainment. I'm glad you brought that up. And they seem to have stopped. But I don't know what made people think that simply referring to something was immediately going to be amusing. I don't know where we ran off the tracks with that, but we could not get that idea out of our heads for a decade or more.
I have a theory, and this is going to go a little bit into the weeds, but it's like as a professional copywriter, I write to be optimized for search, and at one point in our history, in as the history of SEO, it was the more familiar keywords you could get and stuff in your text, the better you did on Google.
Sure.
So it would be like, if I were writing an article on Patrick, it would be like, Patrick McCray wrote the Dark Shadows Daybook and Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound, where he talks about Dark Shadows, Dan Curtis, Jonathan Frid. I mean, literally that. And
so then people looking for those other things would come across that.
Right. So I think with that theory of movie making, it was, well, if we throw stuff that's familiar, people will go, hey, I recognize that. It's the exact opposite of what Airplane did, or the Naked Gun movies or Police Squad did, which is you throw jokes that you hope somebody gets it, and if somebody doesn't get joke A, they'll get joke B. But here it's just throwing, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's more than that too. It is exactly what you're saying. And what Zucker and Abrams did was they took gags that were referential to something that were inspired by something else, and they built a joke around it. And if you recognized it, terrific. Mm-hmm. If you didn't recognize it, it was still intrinsically funny.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment, it still had something. I'd never seen 0 Hour until recently, and so there's a whole other level of jokes in the movie I wasn't getting at all, but it still worked.
Mm-hmm. So back to your question, Joel. I don't, like I said, I don't know if there's, unless there's documented evidence or someone at Capcom says, yes, we did that. We could assume that. I think it's safe to assume, but I don't know if I'd be comfortable saying yes, they did.
Yeah. I'm not sure myself either. I just find it interesting that because I mean, keep in mind, Resident Evil when it started, it when they first introduced the tyrant concept, they didn't put the thing in a trench coat or a hat. But then part two, they do. They put Mr. X, who's a tyrant, in a trench coat and hat, and he's walking around throwing punches at you. And this creature is throwing chops, or the robot is throwing chops at people. I'm thinking, this is too similar to just be a coincidence, but like for them not to have seen this, that's sort of where I.
And the truth is, I think that if the studio that owns the Avengers saw that and thought it was a direct riff, they probably would have. They would have sued.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting, is all I'll say. I do like the fact that you're still getting at the end of this episode the message of, hey, machine isn't always the best way, because again, a machine is not going to respond to a human when you always want it to. Which I like how the Avengers sort of play the machines against each other. It was very clever how they.
Well, now, Joel, you got to tell me that had to speak to the wrestling fan in you, because it had a sort of a this type versus that type wrestling feel. I mean, did you notice this, or am I off?
Yeah. I noticed it right away. But because as soon as she puts the pen, or as soon as they put the pen in the other robot, I'm thinking, okay, big two giant robots versus each other. This is right down WWE/WCW lane. Basically, this is like the Dungeon of Doom versus Hulk Hogan, or better yet, the Yeti coming out and dry humping Hulk Hogan.
Did this happen?
Yeah, that happened. That happened. That happened. I'll send you the video. I'll send you both the video.
Okay.
I never thought I would hear the words "dry humping Hulk Hogan" in conversation, but there you go.
It happened.
There was a prophecy. The prophecy has been fulfilled.
Okay, Paul White, who was the giant in WCW.
Here we go.
Who was the giant in WCW? Basically, from a story standpoint, he was the illegitimate son of Andre the Giant, but not really. And there was this stable called the Dungeon of Doom, and they had all these weird creatures in it. They had the Zodiac. They had the shark, a guy who painted his face like a shark and wore a fin down to the ring, who was John Tenta, who used to be Earthquake. And they had Kevin Sullivan, who sort of looks and dressed like the devil. Then they had a Yeti, the Abominable Snowman. They had all these sort of weird gimmicks in there. And the Yeti comes down, and it's Ron Reese, who has short arms. And he's wrapped. He doesn't look like Yeti. He looks like a goddamn mummy. And he's coming down, and Paul White, the giant, has Hulk Hogan in a bear hug. Well, on the other side, Ron Reese has got short arms. His bear hugging him too, but his arms are so short he can't reach around Hogan and Paul White, and it looks like he's dry humping him. So
that's one reason.
You can see it for yourself. It's crazy.
So do you think that at one point during the filming of this, Patrick McNee was dry humping one of the cybernauts?
I guess.
No. But what this also reminds me of is basically two big men getting together in ring, a la Big John Studd, Andre the Giant, in all seriousness, where these two big colossal giants faced each other, and you weren't sure who was going to win, though Andre the Giant was 7 foot and Big John Studd was not as big as him. Or, for a more modern reference, or people are going to get Undertaker versus Kane, two big 7-footers or 6'10s. Yeah. Or Kevin, my personal favorite, Kevin Nash versus Sid Justice, two masters of the powerbomb going against each other. That match I love most because it's just two big men who are very physical. It did remind me of that sort of aspect of wrestling, because you would see something sort of similar like this to pro wrestling, where it's just these two big entities going at each other, hitting the shit out of each other.
Yes.
Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No.
But that's my answer to it. So yeah, it did remind me of a wrestling sort of match, but they make it make more sense here than most wrestling matches I would have seen be put together. Like there's only been a handful of big guy matches I've seen put together that make sense from a storytelling standpoint. Undertaker and Kane made sense. Kevin Nash versus Sid made sense. The Yeti didn't make any goddamn sense because the Dungeon of Doom didn't make any goddamn sense.
Or how you dealt with Joey Child. Now, my other question, Gordon, I have a question for you. Obviously, this is a bigger hit in England. Very, very, very big hit in England. Stage show, so on and so forth. Of the franchises that would be inspired by this and came about because, perhaps of this, what's your favorite?
I'm just trying to think because I'm not sure. I'm going to put out, and this is going to sound like very corny and it may sound like super obvious or super out of line, but Remington Steele.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I see that. I totally see that. I was not expecting it. But because I was thinking more in English television.
Well, yeah. Well, it's also hard to with English television because you've. I'm just trying to think if there's any, immediate where you can point and say, yeah, that's a thing.
This can be pretty broad. I mean, we can be talking about Sapphire and Steel or Jason King or.
Well, I would say Sapphire and Steel is a little bit more surreal. It's a little bit more. It's one of those where it's like Dark Shadows in that it has a very unique tone.
Julie, you've never seen this. It's a very strange show.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Sapphire and Steel.
Oh no, I've never seen that show.
Yeah, and the thing, it's on Tubi. And the interesting thing about Sapphire and Steel, for me at least, is it's one of the few series where you're able to move through the drama, but you never get a solid, this is what is going on. Like, that with Dark Shadows, okay, Barnabas is the vampire, Quentin is the werewolf. Like, going in, and there's at least one or two lines that give you automatic backstory.
Yeah.
Not that kind of exposition. Well, hi, I'm Quentin Collins. But, you get a sense of who the people are and their relationships.
Right.
You never quite know who Sapphire or Steel are. They've got strange people coming in who they work with, but you're like, okay, so this guy took a little piece of gold foil, puts it on a wall, and it's a computer terminal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, because to me that one of the key features of the Avengers is the interplay between the two leads. That it's that kind of, it's not romantic, but it's not strictly platonic. There's a charm and a grace, and there's a sense of relationship there. And with Sapphire and Steel, you kind of get the sense that it's two leads. It's not I wouldn't call it a warm relationship, but you're never quite sure where they stand with each other.
That's interesting. I'll have to give it a watch.
But I also thought Remington Steele because because you had, even though yes there was a romantic plot inserted in later seasons, I think it was meant to be more of it had that similar dynamic of a man and woman working together, and it's a very unique chemistry. I mean, the only spinoff I can think of, and I think we talked about this either previously or before one of the podcasts, because I think Alan was there, is Adam Adamant Lives. It was a BBC version of this, which is about an Edwardian adventurer who he fights an enemy, he's frozen, but he's revived in mid-60s London. And he's found by a young woman named Georgie, who's like your typical swinging 60s girl. And they would always fight these kind of weird kind of enemies. and there were the lead actor. He was probably best known for his two things. One, his eyebrows, because he had obviously fake eyebrows. It's like, imagine taking like a brown Sharpie and just going across your. And the other is the series. Well, second thing about it, as a side note, it actually figures some of the initial directing work of Ridley Scott, because he worked for the BBC, which is, and it's for 60s television, it's good. But the other thing is that the series would often feature female villains, female antagonists, and the guy playing the lead, Adam Adamant, would often say, when he's initially meeting them, "Oh, my dear, you are so like very fake condescending," but it was like, "Oh dear, you're a woman dealing with such difficult circumstances." And then when he'd find out they're the villain, he's like, "Oh, how could you have been hurt so bad to turn to malevolence and all that?" I mean, it's not something I would not recommend people watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a cult following about it, and there are some episodes that are missing, and I'm glad. But it's the only good thing about it, and I forget the actor's name, but there's a butler who is the most dryly sarcastic, and like he is just ripping through both Adam and Georgie. He is fun. He's got this Boris Karloff look about him, like very droll. Like that's the guy I want. Like that's the guy I want to see the series about. Forget the Edwardian adventure or in the 60s. I want to follow that droll, just take no prisoners butler.
Speaking of other series, I think this might be a good time to do a pitch on Jewel for Dark Place, for Mr. Marenghi's series, because we talked a little about it, and I'd like to hear a little bit more.
Okay, well, Gareth Marenghi's Dark Place was in the early 2000s, and the premise is that it starts with an intro from a horror writer named Gareth Marenghi, who writes a lot of kind of bad 80s novels, and he's introducing a series that he produced in the 1980s. And when you watch it, there are a lot of intentional mistakes, a lot of kind of really over the top ideas, but it's a horror series, and like Gareth Marenghi, and you've all seen the meme, and I know you're out there watching on YouTube. It's like I know writers who use subtext, and they're all bastards. But it's kind of it's a very unique sense of humor, and it's only 6 episodes long, but it's real, and they do interviews in between where it's like you've got people acting, and then you've got like one guy. It is clear he's bad at acting, and it comes to him talking about when I developed this role, I developed this blah blah blah, very pretentious. So I think it's got that mix of like the humor's in the right place, but it's also, it knows what it's parodying, but it also the humor is very much there's the obvious level of bad production.
There is a book, Joel. I'm sorry, Gordon. Go on.
I'd say there's the intentional bad production where you go, yeah, it looks bad, but there's also a much more meta. There's like a second level where it's like, okay, I get it, I can see and then there's a third meta level. Sorry, Patrick.
No, I was going to say there's a book that came out a few years ago about a genre of books called Paperbacks from Hell. Have either of you seen this?
No.
I've seen it. I don't think I've ever read it.
It's great. It's really good. And it's basically looking at the horror boom of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it kind of died out in the 90s, where horror was a major genre on the bookshelves. But most of the books, a lot of them came out of England, were pretty bad. Not just pretty bad, were very bad. and but wonderfully readably bad. And it is a celebration of that genre of sort of very flashy, sensationalistic, and ultimately kind of weirdly unsatisfying writing that is its own genre. In fact, it's just so much so that one of the publishers has gone back and started re-releasing those books as their Paperbacks from Hell series. Graham Masterson comes to mind, the author of the Manitou. Who's it? It's the Herbert who's not the Dune guy. So James Herbert, who wrote the Fog and the Rats and things like that. This is very much Marenghi is one of those writers, but he tried to be a real swinging Harlan Ellison type at the same time, and featured himself in this ultimate horror TV series about Haunted Hospital, and he casts himself, and inexplicably his agent also is cast in it. No, I'm sorry, that's accurate, but we are out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a 3-bean burrito before coming here, so that was me. My bad.
But anyway, it's very funny. If you watched TV horror in the 80s, you watched something low rent. These were things where the special effects were bad, and we knew it at the time, but we had to put up with it because we weren't living in the future yet. And it captures and satirizes a lot of fun macho masculine tropes,
mm-hmm.
and a lot of really silly horror stuff all at the same time. It could not have sustained more than 6 episodes, I don't think. However, there are now some Marenghi story anthologies out there, and here the actor who plays him reads them on Audible. So you can pursue it there.
I found Dark Place for free, so we can.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if he's performing the Milgram experiment.
I'm performing something.
Are you familiar with the Milgram experiment?
No, but my dryer has a buzzer.
Oh, okay.
So sorry about that.
What is the experiment? Just so we know.
Okay. Well, it was a famous experiment where people were brought in, and an examiner would don't spoil it, Patrick.
Oh, sorry.
Would open a room so you might have someone like Jewel and in the room, and the researcher would say, okay, I want you to keep shocking Jewel. Shock him at a low level, he reacts. And it was an experiment to see how people would conform to authority. Yeah. And the trick was the person who's being shocked was play acting.
Because they would say, "Now this is at near lethal levels,"
mm-hmm.
and the person would say,
and what's funny is only a few people would stop, even at a low level. So they would increase the voltage.
Yeah, that's very. Is there anything you guys want to add about this episode before we go?
It's one of these classics. I think we have hit a triumvirate of episodes that if we were to see 3 Avengers episodes or just boil the Avengers down into 3 episodes that were possible, these would be really the ones to watch. I think these are, I'm not to say we have to stop watching at all, but I think these were 3 really beautifully chosen.
Yep, and they're on Tubi, so you have no excuse.
Yes, they are on Tubi. They're very, very good. Is it something you guys want to do tomorrow? Or?
I'm always up for whatever.
We could always watch the sequel.
Yeah. Now, is that the one with Brian Blessed? Because I was hot on that for a while.
No. Brian Blessed was in the Superlative 7.
The Superlative 7, that's it.
Right. Peter Cushing is in Return of the Cybernauts. And it's season 5. I don't have I know it's later on in the season, but it's on Tubi.
That sounds fine to me. I would like to see some of the later stuff because that feels like it's more what CBS late night movie was carrying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as they were trying to deny black and white ever existed.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do. So tomorrow night, let's do Return of the Cybernauts.
Okay. All right. Link to Patrick McCray's Archives Day book about the description box. Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be a description box. You guys have a safe night. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Farewell.